I'm really thankful not only to Aditya for inviting me over for this very important discussion, but I would also like to thank Professor Mukhia for starting the discussion and laying down what we should follow. I'll follow his cue. Uh, he talked about the development of historiography. But before I start uh, my whatever I have to say, let me point out to all the students who are sitting here that Mukhya ji had been my, examiner for my MPhil thesis. Never studied from him, but because he grilled me in my MPhil, viva. So naturally, from that day onwards, I always consider him to be my teacher, and perhaps he is one of those who has been read a lot by our generation. At least I don't know about the present generation. I also thank Ruchika Sharma. Well, she has been fighting since a long period of time. And today also, the way she spoke, the way she gave examples, if the theoretical framework was set by Mukhya ji, Ruchika gave us the examples. I would like to talk about the Sultanate period because most of the examples which have been given, they were actually related to the Mughals, especially Akbar, and of course Jizya and temple destruction. There is lot much more to say, but I will leave that at the moment. I might comment on a few points as I proceed. But before I start on the textbook itself, because there was some discussion in the previous months regarding the role of Aligarh historians, Aligarh left historians, in distorting the history of our past. So I'll just start with that. How many leftist historians are there at Aligarh? Hardly any. Technically speaking, it is only Irfan Habib and Iqtidar Alam Khan who can be taken to be Marxist historians, because after all, they belong to CPM and CPI. Initially CPI and then ultimately CPM. They were the card holders. They are the card holders. So you may say that, yes, both of them are. As far as the person who initiated the Aligarh School of History, Muhammad Habib, he is always taken to be a nationalist historian. He might be left-leaning, but he was not a leftist at all. Similarly, the other person who laid the foundation of what is known as Aligarh School, in fact, the Center of Advanced Study as it existed till 1 year back was something which was given to us by the endeavors of Professor Nurul Hasan. And once again, he was a leftist, no doubt, left-leaning, no doubt, but actually a congressman. He had nothing to do. You cannot, at the most, you can say that he was also a nationalist historian as such. And then there are others who contributed. Ehsan Jan Kaisar, by no stretch of imagination can you take him. Nizami, Professor Khariq Ahmad Nizami, a very well-known Aligarh historian. In fact, there were times when he was opposing the leftism of the others. So, you see, just to clarify the situation, the books were written, the history was being written by Aligarh historians who were actually historians, neither left nor right. All those histories which were being written or taught at Aligarh were by professionals, just like Romila Thapar, just like Bipan Chandra, just like the historians of the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan or the historians of the Allahabad School of History. They were all basically historians per se who had certain different points of view but writing history. Having said that, I would also go on to point out that history has always been the tool of politicians. It's nothing new. History has always been written by the conquerors. It is not for the first time. So we should not lament that the government of India today is interfering. All the governments in the past did interfere. Nothing new. What is new this time is that if others wanted the history to be written which is sympathetic to their point of view, today the attempt is to erase history and replace it with something which in Sanskrit is known as mithya, total falsity. Even if there is some truth in some of the assertions which they are trying to make, at best they are half truths. And perhaps all of us know that half truths are much more dangerous than total falsities. Right? So today, what is being done by the present Hindutva government is replacing history not with mythology. Mythology would mean something for which the evidence is very low. Something happened, but we can't actually prove it. But myth is something which just comes out of our head and our own wishful thinking. And that is what they have been trying to do. Now, as far as the recent textbooks are concerned, for class 8, which have come out recently, and on which we are holding a discussion today, basically I thought that there's one textbook on social sciences, but when I ordered online, I realized that there are actually two textbooks. One dealing with the colonial period, and one dealing with the entire, 13th century down to 17th century. The entire 800 period is reduced to one very thin textbook. The colonial period, on the other hand, which spans over 200 years, also gets the same type of space. I might give you, if there is time, because we are already running into the second hour. If I get time, then we can speak about them as well. But at the moment, I'll just confine myself to the textbook which deals with the history of the medieval period, that is the period between 13th to 17th century. This is the volume 1 of our past, the textbook of social sciences. The chapter 2, which is of 40 pages only, is devoted to 800 years. Let me start with the fact that this entire chapter, which is in 40 pages, has been divided into 7 rubrics, 7 sections.
Sir, you are muted.
The first is, as I said, rise and fall of Delhi Sultanate. followed by a few passages which deal with the resistance to the Delhi Sultans, which was given by the, according to them, the Indian people. And then there is a third section totally devoted to Vijayanagar Empire, followed by the Mughals. Mughals are also, are there between pages 36 to 45, which includes a lot of photographs, big photographs, half page, two-third page photographs. So you might imagine that the actual writing space given to explaining about them is very less. And then you have resistance to the Mughals. So if there was a chapter or a subsection on resistance to the Delhi Sultans, we have a chapter on the resistance to the Mughals, in which basically they discuss the Rajputs, Rana Sanga, Maharana Pratap, Ahoms. Assam is also brought in, a very brief paragraph on them. Actually, very short, two paras in half a page, and followed by 6. Let me just stop here and say that it was only during the period of Guru Gobind Singh that the Nanak Panthis started calling themselves the Sikhs. Actually, the entire period on which this book is debated, there was no Sikh religion as such. It was just, a mystical movement who tried to self-identify themselves as Nanak Panthis. But here we have the term Sikhs and what happened to them under the Mughals. The 6th section is on administering in India. One paragraph on Sultanate, but you would expect that some revenue system might have been, explained out there, something of that sort. What type of administration was there? What type of progress was being made? What were the offices? Nothing of that sort. What you find is emphasis on cruelty of taxation. As if that all the taxation systems before the Sultanate were not at all cruel. And then, of course, 2 pages on the Mughal administration. But I was surprised to see that in this section on Mughal administration, the only period which has been privileged is the period of Akbar. There is no talk of what happened later on, how the evolution of the administrative systems developed, what happened, all that is absent. And then in the last, you have people's lives. Here also, in the people's lives, lot of misinformation has been added, and what was substantial has been removed. Incidentally, there is no mention that it was this period when there was a rise in the trading communities, rise in the number of so-called middle classes. What happened? What type of developments were there in the ruling classes of that period? What was happening to the peasantry? The entire debate which has been conducted by historians like Irfan Habib and others, the Cambridge Economic History of India, all that information is absent. And there are certain wrong attributions. For example, this textbook teaches the students of class 8 that the silver rupaya was introduced by Mughals, Akbar. Akbar did not introduce it. There is also mention that the copper dam was also something which was contributed to by the Mughals. Once again, a wrong information. And when you come to the banking system, the only reference this textbook gives is that temples were the repositories of the money. They were the actual banks of the period. And They were the centers of economic activity, apart from religious activity. And as far as the entire banking system, which developed, indigenously developed under the Mughals, the sarrafs, the hundis, uh, etc., etc., find no mention at all. These students are not introduced to any of that. You know, before coming to the distortions which are there in this textbook, and as I said, that I will basically confine myself to the Sultanate period and would talk only sparsely about the Mughal period, where I mean, wrong information has been added. Before doing that, let me first inform that when the chapter starts, chapter 2 starts, on the top, you have three big questions, the big questions which are to be answered in this chapter, what to expect in this chapter. The first, how did foreign invasions, uh, influence and gave rise, how did foreign invasions took place, and how there was a rise of dynasty because of them, and how they reshaped India's political boundaries. So the starting point is that there was an India, there was a society, there were a people who were known as Indians, and 13th century marks that now suddenly there were outsiders, foreigners who invaded, and the poor Indians had to cope with those invasions. This is the premise. Let me remind here that we are talking about a period when there was no concept of nation, there was no nationhood. And if there was no concept of nationhood, where was the question of foreigner or indigenous? Who was an Indian? Who was a foreigner? The concept, very concept of nationhood started developing only during the 19th century. When nation was not there, it is at that time that our NCERT book is introducing to young minds that it was the period of foreign invasions. The second question, which is put up there, and children are being made available even before reading the chapter, what to expect. How did Indian society respond to these invasions? How did India's economy adapt during times of, the entire Sultanate period is labeled as political instability. So conclusions are there. Before analyzing, there are certain, within inverted commas, facts, wrong mythical facts, which are put up as facts, which these students are supposed to be learning now. And the third question is, what impact did this period have on the lives of the people? As if, when all this killings and rapine and whatnot, which has been discussed in the chapter, took place, how did the people cope with this? How did they preserve their religion per se? I mean, this is the basic premise on which this entire chapter in the textbook dealing with the medieval centuries is dealt with. Now, as I said, that throughout the chapter, only sketches which go to answer or corroborate these three questions which have been raised above. It is only answers to them that certain paragraphs which comprise this chapter deal with. For example, one thing which is asserted, foreign invaders is spread by a force of violence, and they came here to spread their own version of religion. All that research which as Mukherjee was telling us, all that research which was conducted from the period of independence down to 2014, 70 years of research is thrown down drain. Muhammad Habib had written his book Sultan Mahmud of Ghazna around 1952, in which he had tried to prove that the invasion of Mahmud was not breaking of temple or converting people. Now, I don't have time to go into the details of what the arguments of Muhammad Habib were, what type of foundations he was laying. There was subsequent work. We know that Ruchika mentioned Richard Eaton. Richard Eaton's book on temple destruction in India during the medieval period. His perceptive articles on the same theme, which are there published in a journal. It's a pretty long article, which was developed into a book that is also, popularly available on the internet. If you Google search it, it was published long time back in the front line in 2 parts. You can still download it and read it. There are other works also, not only one. I mean, these are the 2 examples which I am giving. One from 1952 and the other which was published in 1990s. Right? So that entire gamut of work is washed away, and the children are being taught that these foreign invaders basically came to forward their own version of religion in India. यह एक रिलीजियस हमला था, पहले से बच्चों को समझ में आ जाए कि सिर्फ मुसलमान बनाने के लिए आए हुए थे, nothing else. Remember that they were here to destroy your religion. Another, mistake which is made, which gives an indication that perhaps the writers of this textbook never read history. Even if they read, perhaps they read the history books which were written before independence, in 1940s perhaps, or even earlier. For example, they refer to the early, Turkish dynasty which ruled in India as Mamluk slave dynasty. Now, which is a term which has long been done away with. Now they are known as Ilbari Turks, the name of their tribe. This term slave dynasty or Mamluk was something which was used during the period of James Mill and the colonial writers. It is no more there. Recent researchers, Iqtidar Hussain Siddiqui and whatnot, they have written article after article, research after research. Read Comprehensive History of India, Volume 5. All of them talk about Ilbari Turks. Mukherjee mentioned a period when A.B.M. Habibullah and others were still writing in the terms of Hindu and Muslim foundations of the Muslim rule in India. Yet all these people had introduced the term Ilbari, which these textbooks are not invoking. They are going back in time. जो इनके आका थे, जिनसे डिवाइड एंड रूल सीखा था, उन्हीं की लैंग्वेज भी यहाँ पे फॉलो करने की कोशिश कर. Thirdly, as I said earlier also, that the entire Sultanate period is a period marked, they say, by political instability. कुछ भी कोई नहीं था सल्तनत में. It was a period of political instability. That whole centralization of power which had occurred after the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate is now negated. And what is introduced to the children is as if there was political stability before. जो fragmented city states बनी हुई थी, जिनको एक के बाद एक कॉन्कर करके महमूद अफ गजनी आया था, जो प्रोविंशियल लेवल की जो छोटी छोटी सी हुकूमतें बनी हुई थी, जिनको एलबरी टर्क्स ने कॉन्कर किया था, they to them to the textbook writers of textbook were periods of stability, whereas when an entire half of the subcontinent, in fact by the Tughlaq period, most of the subcontinent had been joined together, that is labeled as the period of instability. Just the opposite of what was the fact is being inculcated in the young minds. And further, the textbook stresses that this period of political instability resulted in military campaigns, which included raids on villages and cities, plunder, and of course, what else? Destruction of temples and seats of learning. All those researches which had been done by D.N. Jha and others, pointing out who actually demolished Somnath, is now stands negated, and every demolition of seats of learning, this is what is being invoked to. It was done by the sultans of the Delhi Sultanate, followed by another set of factual errors. This regards Alauddin Khilji. We know that Alauddin Khilji was one of the very important rulers of the Delhi Sultanate. The person who gave us the first standing army, the first one to come up with fiscal measures, the first one to think about agrarian measures, the first one to come up with market control measures, the first one who thought that everything should be priced at such a level that the people should not suffer. Remember that a few years back there was a movie which was made on Alauddin Khilji where he was portrayed as a savage. And all of us had jumped at the director of that movie and said, "Ke, kya bana rahe hain ye?" Perhaps he was being inspired, or is it that these people are being inspired by that movie maker? I don't know. But Alauddin, once again, here is being depicted in these textbooks to the young minds as a brute and nothing else. What is written about him? That Alauddin, by sacking and plundering many cities, this is his contribution. Market control are not mentioned. Reforms are not mentioned. And nothing else is mentioned. What is mentioned is sacking and plundering of many cities. It is unsaid that these many cities were inhabited by who else but, within inverted commas, Hindus. This led to this plundered wealth helped finance sultans and sultanats enormous military apparatus. उनका जो रिफॉर्म्स थे फिस्कल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के, उसकी वजह से स्टेट रेवेन्यू में पैसा नहीं आया था, लूट एंड प्लंडर से आया. अलाउद्दीन अगर इतना फेमस बन गया था, इंपॉर्टेंट रूलर हो गया था, वो अपने एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की वजह से नहीं हो गया था, लूट एंड रेपाइन की वजह से हो गया. That is what is being inculcated in the young. They don't stop here. He attacked Hindu centers. Sri Rangam, Madurai, Chidambaram, and possibly, मालूम नहीं possibly क्यों लगा दिया, कौन सा डर था कि इसमें possibly लगा दिया, रामेश्वरम. कम से कम रामेश्वरम का नाम लेके ये तो बता दिया कि खलजी एम्पायर कहां तक फैली हुई थी. लेकिन जो भी खलजीज का कंट्रीब्यूशन है, that is reduced to this and nothing else. From page 25 to 26, 2 pages devoted to this period, and this is the sum total of what they are going to teach the children. So as I said, Ikhta system has not been mentioned. No reference at all एक जरा सा बस एक नाम दे दिया कि हाँ इख्ता इन्होंने किया था. What was it? How it led to the change? How it led to centralization? How it led to the fact that for 300 long years the Sultanate survived? Basing on that, what type of centripetal tendencies were developed because of the ikhtas? It is not told to the students. As far as the Tughlaq period is concerned, Muhammad Tughlaq is invoked, and help of half-truth. Among his measures, two are picked up: moving of his capital to Devgiri, and here it is stressed that it was renamed as Daulatabad. तो अगर आज हम इलाहाबाद को प्रयागराज कर रहे हैं तो कोई नया काम नहीं कर रहे हैं, होता चला आ रहा है. So, and it is a fact, no doubt. I mean, you just can't say that they are giving you a wrong story. But I am just telling how they are cherry picking what to tell and what not to tell. And very intelligently, Daulatabad or Devgiri is explained a city near the present day Sambhaji Nagar. So, read it between the lines. I would ask, when they talk about moving the capital to Daulatabad, was it actually a transfer? Perhaps since the last 50 years or so, new researches have been done. And all those researches point out that there was no transfer of capital at all. The government of India's own archaeological projects go to prove that foundation of a new city at Delhi was taking place. अगर ट्रांसफर हो चुका था, लोग वहां भेज दिए जा चुके थे, भेजने में वो सब बेचारे मर गए थे, परेशान हुए थे, तो यहाँ कौन आके रह रहा था? गौ माता. So what we find is that certain measures, I would take it as ignorance on the part of the authors, क्योंकि अभी भी जो बाजार टेक्स्ट बुक्स हैं उसमें transfer of capital is mentioned. So perhaps they have not read it. So I won't say much of it, but a wrong information is being supplied to the students. The second project of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, which is discussed, is token currency. Yes, he launched token currency. And the textbook also says at the end, yes, the system was quite, something which is now being followed. So justify kar diya hai as an afterthought. But look here, what they are telling the young child at the place where the concept of token currency by Muhammad bin Tughlaq is being introduced. Cheap copper coins were declared to be tokens. Telling the student that it was something which was quite wrong, and also adding next to it that the economy because of which was ruined. So the bad effects, but not the fact that a revolutionary step was being taken. The message should go. It was something which was just like demonetization. बाद में हुआ अच्छा था, लेकिन उस वक्त उसके ये प्रमाण अच्छे नहीं. See another gem. यार आदित्य जब ज्यादा टाइम होने लगे just stop me, है ना. Another quotation I'll read from the textbook. Sultans and their court elite lived in luxurious palaces, enjoying elaborate clothing, jeweled ornaments, and fine food. As if Guptas were not doing that. as if the earlier rulers were not leading lavish lives. It was the sultans who were doing it for the first time. Hmm. This wealth was largely derived from plunder from their military campaigns, taxes levied on common people and conquered regions, and engaging in slave trade. Hmm. So even the developed economy is being condemned in the minds of the youngsters. Hmm. Look at what type of attempt is being made. Plunder, another gem from this textbook, in turn affected trade networks and agricultural production. This period also witnessed numerous attacks on sacred and revered images in Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu temples. Such destruction motivated not only for plunder but also iconoclasm. Hmm. Pick and choose in history, cherry picking. And as Ruchika pointed out, there is an elaborate discussion on the imposition of jizya, not only under the Mughals, but also under the sultans. It was an economic burden and public humiliation and formed a financial and social incentive to convert. Were any conversions taking place? Is there any evidence of any type of conversion which might have taken place due to jizya or otherwise? The question is not taken up nor answered. Because now at this point they are approaching the Mughals, on which Ruchika has elaborated upon. I will just read the introductory paragraph when the Mughals are being introduced. There is a quote from Tammuz. He's quoted as saying that he had two objectives to wage war. Perhaps, I don't know whether this quotation is regarding the Indian campaign or campaigns in general, but the quotation says that Temur said that there was a twofold objective to wage wars. One, war on infidels, and second, plunder the wealth of the infidels. तो जब वो इंट्रोड्यूस किए जा रहे हैं मुगल्स, तो इससे किए जा रहे हैं कि देखिए काफिरों से लड़ने आए थे और काफिरों की दौलत को चुराने आए थे. दिस इज हाउ द मुगल्स आर बीइंग इंट्रोड्यूस्ड. एक लास्ट चीज जो सल्तनत के सेक्शन में मैं कहना चाहूंगा, देयर इज अ सेक्शन ऑन विजयनगर एम्पायर. So we are told that Harihar and Bukka, the founders of Vijayanagar Empire, served as governors under Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Fact. अभी तक तो आप कह रहे थे सिर्फ मार धाड़ काट रिपाइन, सबको सब्जुकेट कर लिया, सबको रेजिस्टेंस हुआ, कैसे सुल्तानों को रेजिस्ट किया गया, कैसे मुगलों को रेजिस्ट किया गया, तो आगे आएगा. लेकिन यहाँ क्या बता रहे हैं? आप बता रहे हैं कि तुगलक के जो गवर्नर थे वो हरिहर और बुक्का थे. वर दे मुस्लिम्स? They were not. You see, this fact is introduced, but the poor mind of the children, they are not going to comprehend what facts are being hidden for the period behind this. In 1565, at a time when Vijayanagar Empire was defeated, it was defeated by the Deccan Sultanates, the Muslim Sultanates of the Deccan, who formed the coalition to defeat Vijayanagar Empire. Most of its temples were destroyed during these attacks. So, हर पॉइंट पे, हर दूसरे पैराग्राफ में there is nothing but talk about temple destruction and how the local indigenous, supposedly Hindu population was killed. Incidentally, it was the period when Mukherjee would correct me, uh, the Buddhists had disappeared by this time. The Buddhist temples which were being broken, Richard Eaton has ably shown that those destructions were not at the hands of any sultan. They were at the hands of the indigenous kings themselves, of the various dynasties. Vaishnavas, Shaivites, each converting the temple of the Kuldevta of the defeated one with the temple of his own Kuldevta. It was in that process that they had been defeated. But here the children are being told that Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu temples were being destroyed by these sultans of Delhi. Now, there is uh, much which is there, much more than what Ruchika discussed as far as the Mughals also are concerned. But perhaps I don't have time. It is already 8:30. I will just remind you that even under Aurangzeb, the finance minister was Raja Raghunath Rai. If under Akbar it was Todarmal, incidentally, that reference is absent in the textbook. He is not being referred. The Todarmal ke reforms थे, his revolutionary revenue administration, they are not being introduced, not only being referred. What to talk about Raja Raghunath Rai, who was the finance minister of Aurangzeb? Look at the works of Satish Chandra, M. Athar Ali, and others. I'm not talking about Audrey Tushke at all. I'm just talking about two, basic primary historians who have, tabulated the works, the nobles of that period, especially Satish Chandra's student M. Athar Ali, and how he has tried to show that the highest mansab of 8,000, it was a large number of Rajputs who were enjoying that mansab. If under Akbar, there were two, nobles enjoying the rank of 8,000, under Aurangzeb, there were at least 6 or 7 who were Rajputs. I'm not mentioning the non-Rajput Muslim mansabdars holding that type of a rank. Remember that what we should have taught the students was the fact that one of the basic contributions of the Mughals was the creation of a cosmopolitan nobility. Read about the Ottoman Empire, read about the Shaybani's empire, Uzbek Khanid empire, read about the Safavid empire of Persia. All of them had nobles who belonged to their own people. If Ottomans and Uzbek Khanid empire basically had Muslim within inverted commas Hanafi Sunni Muslim people who were in majority, the nobles, and if under the Safavids were Shia, they were all Iranians, mostly Shiites, who were made part of the nobility from Akbar down to Aurangzeb, in fact down to Bahadur Shah Zafar. What we find is that the Mughal Empire, the Mughal emperor, in fact, should I say, presided over a nobility which comprised of all ethnicities, all racial groups, all religions, Armenians, Georgians, Turanis, Iranis, Rajputs, non-Rajput Hindus, Hanafis, Shafis, Shiites. You name a religion or an ethnic group, they were part of it. In fact, even people who belong to the lower castes, they were also part and parcel of the Mughal bureaucracy. And that was the beauty of the Mughal system, which sustained the Mughal Empire for such a long period of time. That is all missing from these textbooks, and incidentally, the children are not being, told about it. Just one last point, Aditya. I know I have taken much time, but सबने लिया है तो मैं भी थोड़ा सा ले लेता हूँ. And that is that when Ruchika, you were talking about temple destruction. तो मैं दो examples आपको दूंगा. There is an example from Kalinjar. I had surveyed the Kalinjar fort some time back, a few years back, a decade or so back. So naturally, before you go and survey something, you read the texts on them. You also read the epigraphs. It was a fort which was held by the non-Muslims, which was conquered by Sher Shah. In fact, Sher Shah lost his life during the conquest of Kalinjar. Within this fort, when Sher Shah died outside the ramparts, his son Islam Shah had become the king, and his crowning took place at Kalinjar fort. So hurriedly a mosque was built. An old building was reshaped into a mosque, and there an inscription was put up. It still survives, in which the source claim that Darul Harb was converted into Darul Islam. What this means is that all those idols and temples were broken, and now this mosque is being created and it is being converted into an Islamic site. But mark me, go to Kalinjar, it still has a dozen or so temples, some of them dating back to Gupta period, and with not a single chisel mark which is there on them. There is a big image of Kal Bhairav, a naked Kal Bhairav, with his sexual organ which is of immense size, intact, being mentioned by Abul Fazl in his history. He says that's a remarkable figure. And even when the Surs conquer it and claim that they have converted Darul Harb into Darul Islam, one of the most obnoxious things for Islam should have been this image. It is intact even till this. Nothing happened to it. So claims are there, but actualities are also there, which should be taken into account. Another example, the last example which I'll give and stop, is something which Professor Mukhia and I both of us have witnessed. The Bir Chabili Tila, which was excavated by some of the officials of the ASI in the year 2000, in the hope of getting something to prove that Akbar built over an old Hindu town. This was a mound which is outside the palatial complex at a distance. It was a mound which was actually besides the lake. It has nothing to do with the palaces of Akbar. On top of that, before excavations, there were Mughal graves which had been built on top of that, meaning thereby that there was no memory of anything related to iconoclasm buried within. Excavations took place, a temple was discovered, number of idols were found, some Jain and some Vaishnavite. One Jain image, which was also perhaps taken to be a deity by the Vaishnavites, It was a deity which was dual. It was broken but buried in a sitting posture, upright posture. All the other Jain images, which had no relation with Jainism, were buried head down, topsy-turvy. All just rumbled together, except this one particular, idol, which was there, in a sitting position, as if ke bada gracefully usko karke aur, and on top of that, a second temple was built. The excavators did not tell us about it. They did not say that there was a Jain temple which was broken, whose idols were broken and buried, with one particular idol which was associated with some Hindu god, thus revered, was also broken but buried in a very, sanctified way. All those idols are now in the ASI museum at Agra. Meaning thereby, and then the newspapers kept on claiming for months. Mukherjee had to write on that, and then I had to go and then carry out an exploration and give a report to the Indian History Congress. The allegation was that it was Mughlon ne tod diya tha. It was the Akbar who had actually got it. That was how the news was being circulated. जो काम उस पीरियड के कम्युनल न्यूज़पेपर्स और कम्युनल ऑफिशियल्स ने किया था, what I am trying to end with by saying that वही काम कुछ रोग एलिमेंट्स ने जो पहले 2000 वगैरह में किया था, now the same work is being done by the officials of this present day government, and that is what we should be aware of. Thank you very much.